everyone. Welcome into the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Glad that you're with us today, either listening on the radio in Louisville at 93.9 or on Google Play, iTunes, or watching and listening to us on YouTube. Please like and subscribe. It's very important to keep this show going. This is episode number 40. That is 40 of the Horse Racing Show. And it has flown by, and we're just a week away now from the Breeders' Cup at Santa Anita. So we'll talk about that in just a few moments with Laffit Pincay III on the scene in L.A. And, of course, he'll be working the Breeders' Cup show on NBC with me and everybody else. Our crew will be back together for that. And later on, we'll be talking to a lady who has bred a Breeders' Cup winner already in Bayern, who was the 2014 Classic champ. And she has just an electrifying filly out there right now, Covfefe. And Helen Alexander will join us. And she has a great history of horse racing dating back to the legendary King Ranch. And so lots to talk about with her. So Laffit Pincay III, Helen Alexander coming up. And with me, as always, is our keen researcher, Mr. Thomas Kenny, who is officially Mr. Thomas Kenny.
How are we doing today, everybody?
So, Thomas, are you excited about this year's Breeders' Cup?
You know, I think it'll be pretty interesting. It's pretty up in the air as far as I'm concerned.
I think this
the Classic and the Distaff.
I think these are some of the two best races. I always love the Classic and Distaff anyway, and I like the Sprint. You know, there's been some crazy moments in the Sprint, some upsets, but I think the Classic this year. I'm trying to think of a year where you think maybe there's a horse or two, but I believe that you could probably go deep 5, 6 horses and make a case for. At the moment, I'm leaning to Mackenzie. I don't know, home track, Bob Baffert's made a change. When Bob Baffert changes and puts Mike Smith on the sideline to replace him, it's certainly not a personal thing. It's all business. And I think he's gotten really serious. He's always serious, of course, but I think this really means a lot to him. There's a name for his friend who died of cancer. He gave it. They said, Bob, you name him. He said, I'm naming him after Mackenzie. And, so I think this is really a special horse for him, for very sentimental reasons. And, I'm looking forward to it. We'll be out there starting next week. Breeders' Cup moments. Do you have a favorite one or two?
Well, I mean, it's hard to go against American Pharoah.
Yeah.
He won what is essentially the Grand Slam of horse racing.
Yeah.
All 3 Triple Crown races and the Classic.
Yeah.
In 2015. But there's also, I remember when I was 11 years old, my mom came and got me. She said, Thomas, a filly just won the Breeders' Cup Classic. And I said, Mama, what's a filly? Well, she told me that was a girl horse.
Yeah.
And that had never been done before.
And may never be again. Zenyatta. We had Jerry Moss on a couple of weeks talking about that. Those are 2 great memories. And 2 of the best memories, I think. I wasn't there. I watched Zenyatta on TV win it, but I was there to interview Bob Baffert right after Pharoah won at Keeneland. And completed what may never happen again, by the way, the Grand Slam. I don't know if it's going to happen again.
Who knows?
Because I think if you win a Triple Crown like we saw with Justify, get them to the breeding shed. They're not going to stay around. So I really doubt if a Triple Crown winner will ever again stay around till November to run in a Breeders' Cup race. That's my prediction. Write it down, episode 40. If we're around next year for episode 80, we may revisit it. There's a Triple Crown winner getting ready to go to the Breeders' Cup, Scott Hall. Glad to have him back on lead guitar and drums and everything else today. Welcome back, Scott.
Hey, thanks, guys. Good to be back.
All right. See, and then you'll say, hey, didn't you say on 40 that they'd never happen again? They got a horse going for the Grand Slam again. But it won't happen. Anyway, stay with us. Coming up next, we go to Los Angeles, California, talk to our friend Laffit Pincay III, get his take on this year's Breeders' Cup and the feeling around Santa Anita. You're in tune to the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Thank you for tuning in again this week, episode number 40. This man has been on before. He's one of my favorite people to hang around, much less just to work with. He is Laffit Pincay III. You've seen him on Fox, you've seen him on NBC, and you'll see him all throughout the NBC coverage of the Breeders' Cup at Santa Anita coming up next week. Laffit, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Kenny. What's going on? How are you?
And, it's home track for you. You'll just walk over. Well, okay, you may drive. But It's home track. So what's the feeling like now out at Santa Anita as the days are counting down to the big race days?
Yeah, I get to just roll out of the rack and roll down the street, and then I'm at the racetrack. It's the home field advantage for sure. There's always so much anticipation and excitement surrounding this particular event. You see trainers that you normally wouldn't see at Santa Anita. Steve Asmussen and his string that's out here already, obviously, and I think you're seeing a little bit more of that just for we might be dealing with a racetrack that we haven't dealt with in the past on a Breeders' Cup afternoon. It's a deeper type of surface, so I think there's a little bit more emphasis on horses getting some work over this track for familiarity purposes, and seeing horses train here like Matoli, and who's already here, who worked this morning and who set the track on fire. He was amazing. Yeah, you can feel it. We're getting close. Free entries are coming out, and you can feel the excitement build.
You mentioned about the track surface. Is it more along the lines of what we would see in the East? That's usually not the case with a California track, which is generally a little harder, a little faster track?
Yeah, you have those lightning fast surfaces that we're accustomed to. There's so much data now. There's been so many Breeders' Cups at Santa Anita. This will be the 10th. Typically, you try to connect the dots and trying to find some of those trends, Kenny, because this has happened in this year's event at Santa Anita. It kind of understanding what's happened in the past can sometimes help what's going to happen in the future. That might be different this year. Mm-hmm. We normally have the faster Santa Anita tracks. Of course, the two isolated years where we had the synthetic tracks.
Right.
This is a deeper, more tiring surface. And for that reason, again, I think it's horses that are stabled here, horses that have been training here might be that much fitter. But yeah, maybe it is a little bit more similar to what some of the racetracks back east are than those horses are accustomed to, going over tracks like, Big Sandy, that kind of thing.
And when you're out at the track in the morning, I still think there's few things that you'll experience in sports, much less in racing. You get to see it all the time. But, when I come out there, I love to just hang around Clocker's Corner. If I do nothing, just hang around, listen to some of the conversations. I think that's really one of the special places in horse racing that you'll see at Santa Anita.
I tell fans all the time, or just someone who's interested in going to the track, who's talking about going to Santa Anita and watching an afternoon of thoroughbred racing. And that's great. You go on a big Saturday and you see the big races and the big trainers and the better horses, but experiencing Clocker's Corner in the morning for someone who has any interest in horse racing, and the backdrop with the San Gabriel Mountains and all the activity on the track, the horsemen at Clocker's Corner, that's really something to be experienced if you hadn't had a chance to do it. It's a little bit different, I think, than any other setting. In the morning at a racetrack, there is that social sense at Clocker's. And again, the backdrop is second to none.
Yeah, and that's why I'm glad that the Breeders' Cup elected to keep it at Santa Anita. I think with all the history of that track and what the track has meant to racing, even with the problems and all of this year that's been well documented, I think it's a great thing to keep it at Santa Anita. And I've said that when they made their decision weeks ago.
It is. I thought so as well, in the sense that, look, it's going to be different, Kenny. We are going to be watching those races where, of course, we want to see it's championship racing, and this is why the event was created, so the championships were decided on the racetrack as opposed to comparing resumes. But yeah, we'd be lying to ourselves if we said this isn't different. You're going to watch those races in anticipation of seeing who's going to win, of course, but what's most important is that every horse comes back healthy. Not that that's not the case every day at every track, but even more so this year, because there's been a lot of turmoil because of the number of catastrophic injuries that took place earlier in the year at Santa Anita. The thing is, and statistically, it's been a safer track since they've reopened than just about any. It's been incredibly safe. You saw what happened at Del Mar this summer. There was an entire summer of racing without one breakdown, and
sadly got no attention because there was no problems.
Right.
I'm talking on a scope, like the LA Times covering something like that, or mainstream covering that.
The way things are right now, being at DEFCON 9.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, if there's one incident, it somehow negates the changes that have been made. The fact that we had an incident-free summer of racing in the afternoon at Del Mar, you're back to square one, and it makes it it makes it difficult from that standpoint. So sure, because of that, it's going to feel a little bit different watching the races, but you have world-class trainers. You have the changes that are in place. It is a safe track, and you hope that everything goes as smooth as possible for the lead up to Breeders' Cup and beyond.
Talking with Laffit Pincay III, you'll see him all over the place next week on NBC, and you can see him. You can go out and see him probably in his backyard if you want to. But you can also see him on Fox in many places. How's that? It could be like a tourist attraction.
You're allowed. You can come over and hang out in the backyard as well. You can almost see Santa Anita in the backdrop we're talking about from the backyard.
You and Sonia are such a lovely couple. You're like one of my favorite all-time couples. You know that.
You have to come by while you're out here. Is Nancy coming?
No, working. Somebody has to work.
Somebody.
I'm just showing up. I'll stick a microphone and ask a couple of people, hey, how you doing? How's the race? Which the guy that, I say will probably be interviewed more than anybody on the backside and everything leading up to it is Bob Baffert, of course, who has made a big change. When the Hall of Famer Mike Smith, and we know the deal, they teamed up with Pharaoh and won the Triple Crown and all. With Justify and won the Triple Crown just last year. So when he makes a change with McKenzie, this was, it's business. It ain't personal. It's a Godfather situation.
Yeah, it's interesting in that if you only tune in to watch the Triple Crown or the Breeders' Cup, I think that's going to take some explaining. And it's like, wait a second, these guys just won a Triple Crown together, and now why aren't they on the same team, so to speak?
Mm-hmm.
If you saw, Belichick on one sideline and Brady on the other, how odd would that be?
Right.
But it's not just McKenzie. So Mike Smith is not riding McKenzie. He's been replaced there. McKenzie got into a lot of trouble in the Metten Mile. That was so much a poor ride by Smith. I thought that was just more Murphy's Law than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Everything he tried just went wrong. And he comes back, he wins the Whitney, but I know that Baffert was a little bit discouraged by the trip and how things went in his most recent race, so he made the switch. But also on Baffert's two big 2-year-olds. He's going to have 2 of the favorites for the juvenile and the juvenile fillies, Bass for the fillies and 8 Rings for the boys.
Right.
And John Velasquez is riding both of them. So this isn't just an isolated scenario with Smith riding, with Smith being off McKenzie. It's also with the younger horses as well. So maybe a little bit more of a trend than we're a little bit unexpected. And maybe there's more meat on that bone, but we'll have to dig a little bit deeper.
East meets West coming together. Velasquez from New York, Baffert from California as one at Santa Anita.
So they've won a combined, I think, Kenny, it's 31 Breeders' Cup races.
Yeah.
Velasquez and Baffert, multiple Kentucky Derbies. They're both in the Hall of Fame, and they've never won a Breeders' Cup event together. Now, mind you, a lot of that has to do with the fact that, John Velasquez being first call for Todd Pletcher.
Right.
Pletcher trains a lot of the same type of horses that Baffert does. It's the 2-year-olds, it's the sprinters, primarily on dirt. So that you can, it's not as if they've teamed up many times, but I think the fact that you're seeing one of the very best modern day trainers, arguably the best trainer ever of dirt thoroughbreds in the history of this sport, one of the greatest modern day jockeys, teaming up and trying to win a juvenile and a juvenile fillies together with 2 major contenders. That's going to be fun to watch.
Omaha Beach is going to be there. That's going to be a story. Lots more to talk about with Laffit Pincay III. Stay with us. This is the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Thank you for tuning in again this week. Episode number 40. Wow, it keeps going. One reason we have great guests each week, like Laffit Pincay III with NBC Sports getting ready for the Breeders' Cup just days away. And Laffit, I gave that little tease about Omaha Beach. I think he'll be one of the more intriguing horses out there. We've only seen him run one time since Arkansas. Of course, he was the Derby favorite, didn't run, comes back, has a spectacular race at Santa Anita, and Richard Mandela actually had the option of trying to figure out what spot to put him in. That's how much they think of Omaha Beach.
It was incredible. On, what was it, October 5th, in a little over a minute and 8 seconds,
Yeah.
Omaha Beach became one of the more intriguing stories of this year's Breeders' Cup. We didn't know what to expect in the Santa Anita Sprint Championship. There's no guarantee when a really good horse undergoes a throat procedure. Those things can be tricky. There's no guarantee they're going to regain their top form. And he brought it. And he beat the fastest 3-year-old in North America in Chance-A-Lot. And the way he did it, showing that grit and determination, coming along the inside and running him down. Because if he gets beat and runs second that day, you still say, well, that's a good jumping off point. We'll see where he goes from then. I didn't think he could beat Chance-A-Lot in his first race back, and he did. And it because of it, there's an added sense of excitement surrounding a horse who would have been a Kentucky Derby favorite, who never had a chance to run in a Kentucky Derby. Now he's going to run in the dirt mile. I think part of that may have to do with the fact that, there's a shared interest when it comes to retirement. Spendthrift, Matoli, who's going to be one of the major contenders for the sprint, he's going to Spendthrift. Omaha Beach is going to Spendthrift. Maybe they wanted to keep them separate. So I was a little bit surprised at first. From that standpoint, sure, it does make sense. I was looking forward to seeing him in either the sprint or the classic. Mandela said he didn't have time to get him ready for the classic. But what's important is that we get to see Omaha Beach on a Breeders' Cup stage. That's what matters.
We talked earlier, Laffit, about how important it is, in deciding championships. Not always, but many times it decides championships. Some in the division are more clear-cut. Horse of the Year, I don't know how wide open a Horse of the Year race has been in several scenarios. Midnight Bijou, she wins big, let's say. Bricks and Mortar wins big. Mackenzie bounces right back and wins big. Maybe even a Code of Honor pops up there and wins big in the classic. It's going to be an interesting vote on Horse of the Year, I think, if something like that shakes out.
Kenny, what happened? I mean, you have to think which horses control their own destiny.
Yeah.
If Midnight Bijou wins going away, I'd find, and depending on what Bricks and Mortar does as well, for some of the other horses, certainly in the Classic, and normally we lean towards the Breeders' Cup Classic to find where the Horse of the Year is going to emerge from. But most of those horses, they've all had a misstep at some point this season. Not the case with Bricks and Mortar, not the case with Midnight Bijou. And it's not as if they've been conservatively campaigned, but it's one of those years where it was from American Pharaoh and Justified doing what they did in the Triple Crown. This year's the 3-year-olds. It's been the antithesis of that. It's been so wide open and so wacky. The older horse division isn't the strongest we've seen.
Right.
You have to give a long, hard look to what in the two horses you brought up in Midnight Bijou and Bricks and Mortar. If they do what they're expected to do, I'd be surprised if anyone else, walked away with the Horse of the Year hardware.
Yeah, and of course, we've seen it with Rachel Alexander and also with Zenyatta, of course. But for a filly to be out there, mare be out there in contention, and a grass horse to be in contention for Horse of the Year, I think that's what's really made it intriguing. And you're right, it's not like the heavyweight division, which is the classic division. You have that one where you say, wow, I can't wait to see him again, because I think the classic might be as open as it's ever been.
There's still questions about Mackenzie at 1.25 miles.
Yeah.
He did just get beat by a horse who wasn't Breeders' Cup nominated. This in Mongolian Groom. They had to supplement the $200,000. Vino Rosso is really improved from 3 to 4. He's more tactical now, but he's not a world beater. He's going to be maybe third choice somewhere in there. Code of Honor has been very good as well, but Ali Sheba's not walking through that door. It's not Sunday Silence and Easy Go, or Cigar is not going to be in that starting gate. And there's nothing wrong with that. It when you have those type of superstar older horses that simply go out there and dominate, you appreciate it that much more. It's not easily done. Horses are retired much earlier now, unfortunately. But it does open up the door and leave opportunity for another. And in this case, when it's strictly that Horse of the Year conversation. I mean, you could make an argument for Mitole as well.
Yeah, Mitole, exactly.
Everything he's done. His one loss, the loss in the Vanderbilt, excusable on that the deep bad part of the Saratoga track.
Mm-hmm.
He's been incredible. One of the most exciting racehorses in training in Mitole. So, so we don't have that great older horse, but it's been a good year when you look at a Bricks and Mortar and Midnight Bisou and Mitole, and that's why this championship stage was designed, to watch them, to have a place for them to compete towards the end of the year and really go out there, test their mettle, and earn their stripes again.
Do you have it? And I'll have to qualify this. They asked me at Keeneland, one of the deals, for one of those Breeders' Cup hits that they put on the web like a couple of years ago, to give your favorite Breeders' Cup moments, which opens it up. Somebody's going to argue with you. And I said, I can't give a definitive. Sure, there's some, like a Wild Again, I think will stand the test of time just for the timing of him winning the Classic that first time out and setting a stage. But I went through like 10 of them.
That wasn't very popular in the Pincay household.
I'm sorry.
Remember that.
And if your dad was here, I wouldn't bring it up.
I still tease Pat Day about it. I said, you look at the head-on, you're going to tell me the Gate Dancer was coming in more than Wild Again was drifting out. He's like, look at the tracks. We're actually not coming out. He still defends it. But you think back to Wild Again, 360,000. I mean, so much is being made about Napoleon Groom being supplemented for 200,000.
Yeah,
$360,000 to supplement a horse who I want to say he got beat at like Bay Meadows or something.
I think so. Yeah,
the class was crazy. The dark horse they called him, and he wins.
Oh, it was, you couldn't make it up. It was the perfect deal for the first time out. It was just a perfect storyline. Do you have?
That's $360,000 in 1984.
Yeah, that's when it was money. They asked me all about that at Keeley. They asked me to do this thing, so I do this thing. So I rattle them off, and I think I'm brilliant. I rattle off like 10 things, and I qualify it all. The one I left out was Pharaoh winning the Grand Slam at Keeneland in 15. I happened to be there. I should
see, but that's what happened. It's almost like being nearsighted. When you think of these great moments, and they're lodged into our minds and our memory, and what comes to mind is Personal Instance 88.
Oh, yeah.
And Ferdinand and Ali Sheba in the Classic. And the next year, Ali Sheba in the Classic. There's been so many great moments. And Zenyatta and for Goldakova winning the 3 straight Breeders' Cup miles. And then you kind of lose sight of what's right in front of you. And you mentioned American Pharoah. The one thing that disappointed me about his Classic is who he didn't get to run against. How good that Classic would have been.
Right.
What happened to Richard Mandela this year with Omaha Beach, that's happened before. Rock Hard 10 slipped a frog before the Classic in
That's
05.
right.
Boulder was supposed to be in that Breeders' Cup Classic against American Pharoah. And you can see how the race would have unfolded headed up the backstretch with California Chrome if they didn't take him off to Europe on his adventure, whatever the end goal that might have been at the time. If California Chrome had been here in training doing his thing in that Classic, had Liam's Map, who ran in the dirt mile, who I still think would have been leading the field,
right,
with Beholder sitting in behind him, with California Chrome there and American Pharoah, that would have been an all-time great Classic. I think that's what, for me personally, my personal prejudice, doesn't take anything away from American Pharoah.
Yeah.
It's just a Classic should have looked like. That, FNX ran second. That was more of a... It's not as if American Pharoah was facing the best older horses in training. Not taking anything away from American Pharoah.
I understand.
Just as a racing fan, what I would have liked to have seen.
Well, what you'd like to see out there, all racing fans, is anytime Laffit Pincay III is on the air, and I really mean that, my friend, and that will be all day next Friday and Saturday on NBCSN, and then the big one, the Classic, will be on NBC. And I'll see you in a matter of days.
Look forward to seeing you, Kenny. As always, my friend. We'll see you soon, buddy.
All right, pal. Thank you so much. Hi to your dad, who was by far one of our more favorite guests by everybody. He was great.
He loved it. He absolutely enjoyed it. He thinks the world of you and had a blast on the show.
Well, I think that of the whole Pincay family. Thanks again, Laffit, and I'll see you soon, pal.
Too kind. Best to Nancy. I'll talk to you soon. Say hello to your father.
All right, I will. Thank you. Laffit Pincay III from NBC with us. Helen Alexander talks about the breeding business when we come back on the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Thank you for tuning in all across the country and now in over 20 countries. that have downloaded this show. We really appreciate that. And I'm delighted to have this lady on with us. She has been a friend for many years. She comes from a legendary family in the business, and she has a couple of horses going in the Breeders' Cup races. Helen Alexander, welcome.
Thank you.
You've been there before with Bayern, most notably winning the Classic in 2014. That was the one bred and raised at your Middlebrook farm in Kentucky. What's that feeling like just to be in a Breeders' Cup and then win one?
Gosh, I mean, having a horse that's good enough to be one of the 14 that gets to start in any Breeders' Cup races, it's a huge honor and a thrill, and, you know, it's what everybody dreams of. And to have a winner is kind of, you know, feeling just like none other. I mean, it's just over the top, especially the Classic. I mean, and that one was kind of a tough one because there was a long, you know, inquiry.
I was there. I remember it well, standing with Bob Baffert waiting to see.
Yeah, so it was, and you know, the other thing that was really fun about that was he gave Bob Baffert his first Classic. So I was really excited about that too.
And I imagine, you know, the personal investment that you make, not just the financial, but the emotional and the time of when that horse is raised at Middlebrook. It's right there, and you see them growing up and sending them on their way now to become successful, you hope. That's just probably a feeling hard to describe unless you experience it, I would always imagine.
Well, you know, I mean, the nice babies that you raise, you're always hopeful that they're going to be good, but when they actually pan out, you know, it's so cool, and it makes everybody on the farm so happy, and, you know, because they invest a lot of time and effort and put in some hours during some, you know, horrible weather and all that. And so I'm always very happy for them too.
You know, you grew up on King Ranch is just this legendary place. I knew about King Ranch long before I met you. There's nobody that's even passed through Texas that didn't see something that said King Ranch on it, I don't believe. With that one time 600,000 acres of cattle and horses, and of course with Assault, the 1946 Triple Crown winner. What was that whole experience like? Was it that you were definitely going into the horse business or some kind of occupation to continue on the tradition of the family?
I always was a nut for horses. You know, I love to ride, and I mean, it's what I thought about day and night. I wasn't interested in doing any other sports. All I wanted to do was ride, and broke a lot of ponies growing up, and, you know, did a lot of things that my mother wouldn't have liked very much, like jumping on from the back and standing up in the saddle, and, you know, all kinds of crazy things.
Okay, like cowgirl stuff.
Cowgirl stuff. Plus, I did a lot of jumping, and, you know, I was not supposed to do that by myself, but I did, and had my first horse fall on me when I was by myself doing that. Luckily, nothing happened, but, you know, when I think back on it, I'm like, wow, you kind of had a charmed life.
But look at the success you continued with that.
Well,
you know, to me, it's you know how the success continues, and it has from King Ranch. I first met you. You were running their Kentucky division up here.
that's right. Yeah.
That's where we met a few years ago.
Yeah, a few years ago.
A few years ago.
Yeah, still 29, right?
Yeah, we were out there. I think it was doing like a down the stretch story or something back in the old ESPN days, something like that.
Yeah, maybe about Althea or something.
It could have. You know what? It probably was Althea.
Yeah.
I would say that was probably it.
Yeah.
Was that kind of like the breakthrough moment, on your own moment, Althea?
Yeah, I mean, she was, you know, she was really special. I mean, she was champion 2-year-old filly of her year. She beat Colts 4 times, you know, set a track record in the Arkansas Derby, and, you know, then went on to be a good broodmare, and she is the 4th dam of Covfefe. So that's kind of exciting. This year's Breeders' Cup entrant for my family.
And you speak of Covfefe, lightning fast.
Yes,
I remember when I
is.
saw her, and I was talking to trainer Brad Cox, who's been on our show before. She's just, and you have bred her. I think she's got a great shot.
I hope so.
You being on the show or not, I would have said that. I just love to watch her. She just takes off.
Yeah, she's a little rocket, and she reminds me a lot of her grandmother, Aurora, who was also the dam of Arch, who wasn't a sprinter, but you know, Aurora was really fast, and this filly's really fast, and it's just kind of it's fun to have this family keep on producing these top quality horses.
Bloodlines are, it's all about the bloodline, isn't it?
It is, yeah. In the end, I mean, sometimes you have horses that overachieve, as far as their bloodlines go, but I think, for long-term success, having a good bloodline is going to make a big difference.
Is there, when you're looking to breed a horse, is there the one thing that you're going to look at first, Helen, when you say, I've got to get this mare, I've got to look at some potential stallions? Is there a thing you're looking at first and foremost?
Well, probably first I think about aptitude, whether like a mare needs to have a little more speed or maybe a little more distance. Then I think about the conformation. And then last, really, I think about how the pedigrees are going to match up.
Mm-hmm. We're talking with Helen Alexander, Middlebrook Farm. Covfefe. I love that name.
I know,
which is not a word, by the way. It's not even a word. It was President Trump's tweet popped up, and that became the name. And every time I see Brad Cox, he's got a Middlebrook Farms hat on. So for that alone, the publicity you're going to get from running her in this race.
Well, actually my farm manager came up with the idea of doing the hat. He wanted to do something nice for the guys that work on the farm and girls. And so, we did the hat, and then I said to my assistant, I said, we need to get Brad Cox one of these hats. I think he'd get a kick out of it. And it's funny that I've seen him being interviewed wearing that hat, and I love it. It's great.
I was at a football game a week ago. He had the hat on. He wears it everywhere. How much, and so much of it is, how much is still marketing, and especially the social media world, and people obviously in the business know Helen Alexander. They know your history. They know Middlebrook Farm. They know about Bayern, Covfefe. They know about Althea, all the successes you've had. But reaching out, is it more of a, marketing thing? Is it different these days to try to get other people to come into the business, those that want to buy horses or breed horses?
Well, it's such a funny thing what motivates people in the horse business. And I think, a lot of people, you hear, oh my God, I saw the Kentucky Derby, or I, was in the infield at the Derby and I just had to do this, or they came in as people that like to bet. And I think we also get lots of people that really enjoy going to Saratoga and to Keeneland and Del Mar, places like that, get converted that way.
Yeah. And when somebody, if I came to you and I said, Helen, I really want to get into the horse business, what do I need to do first off? I guess write a check would probably help.
Well, it doesn't hurt, that's for sure. I think just being as well informed as you can possibly be, talking to a lot of people, reading about the game, things like that are helpful.
I told people that asked me, I said, I just from a covering standpoint, reporting on it standpoint, it's a lot like a stock market. You just can't kind of wing this thing. You got to keep up with it and up with the trends and what's going on. You just can't one day say, hey, I got a lot of money, I'd like to buy a horse. I
mean, if you're going to be like a day trader, you got to be somebody that's really good at it, And so I do think there's a lot of similarity. Yeah, you've got to do your homework in order to be successful.
No one's done their homework better than Helen Alexander over the years, from King Ranch now to Middlebrook Farms. We'll continue our conversation right here on the Horse Racing Show. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. So glad that you're with us. Delighted to have a friend of mine, Helen Alexander, on. After all, the Breeders' Cup is coming up, so why not talk to a breeder? And she's had great success in the past. We think of the likes of Althea and Bayern. Covfefe, keep an eye on her. Don't blink because she's lightning fast. She'll be running in there. And you have another one in the marathon named Campaign that's going to be running.
Yeah, Campaign belongs to Woodford Thoroughbreds, which is a partnership. And I've talked to a couple of the people that are in the partnership, and they're like super excited about him running and think he's got a good chance.
Everybody has a good chance, don't they?
They do.
Does anybody ever come to you and say, Helen, look, I don't have a prayer, but I'm in this race if you want to come and watch?
Yeah, I mean, the amazing thing is that, as long as your horse is doing really well and moving forward properly, you've got a really good chance. And you can be 40-1, or in the case of our Kong, 90-1, and you can get the job done.
Yeah. Do you have well, I know your moment would probably be Bayern, I guess. I was going to say, do you have, other than Bayern, do you have a favorite moment of a Breeders' Cup not involving a Middlebrook Farm horse that you just really enjoyed the race?
Well, that one, I mean, I was so hoarse I could hardly talk the next day. So
I
I was pretty excited.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's the top of the list. That's the given, you know?
Yeah, that was a good one.
Because somebody's asked me, and I said, there's been so many. And I'll just forget an obvious one. I'll start going back and go, wow, I remember like our Kong, and, I remember, I go back to the very early days. And, I remember Ali Sheba winning it in the dark, basically. I remember Ferdinand and Ali Sheba the first time Derby winners met in the class. Those. And you forget, you don't forget them, but sometimes it's so close that you almost slips your mind some of the ones that have happened recently.
There have been some really amazing ones from the very first one, which was a super thrilling race, to Zenyatta winning. I mean, it's every year it produces a pretty exciting result.
Growing up on King Ranch, what was that like? I mean,
God.
I don't. I mean, this. It's like a fantasy for the rest of us to look in and see 600,000 acres. I think at one time, and a Ford named a truck after the. You drive an F-150, it may have a King Ranch emblem on it.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about that partnership with Ford. I mean, that's been pretty successful, and I love seeing those King Ranch trucks out on the road. It's great. Just, I don't know, for a kid that loved the outdoors and loved nature, I mean, it's really a special place to be. I mean, it's full of wild animals and birds and beautiful habitat.
Yeah, and I imagine growing up, you heard a lot about assault. Probably the others. You start going down the list. Again, we're talking like Breeders' Cup. You start going around great King Ranch horses. There's a lot, but, Assault, I guess, jumps out.
Yeah, I think my grandparents had an amazing run with him, and so did my mom, who was really just coming out of high school at that time, and, they were just over the moon. But, it's interesting, too. I remember my grandfather telling me stories about, going straight from Louisville to Pimlico, and I was like, well, that's weird. And when I looked at the actual charts, you realize that the Derby and the Preakness back then were only a week apart.
That's right. I forgot about that.
So, I mean, but they had a ball.
Oh, that's it's such a great time, and it still continues. And you mentioned your mother, and then you come along. I don't know, how it was for women in racing. It's certainly a different day and age, thank goodness now. But was it ever a time when you're the girl trying to run the farm? Did you ever feel that way in the business, which has been basically a guy's business for so long?
No, honestly, I never did. The only thing I remember was like when I'd go to the track early in the morning with my grandfather. It was mostly at Saratoga, and there weren't that many girls that were galloping horses back then. And I always thought, gosh, that looks like it would be so fun to do. And, there was kind of a stigma attached to being a female and working on the track back then, which thankfully has completely changed.
Helen Alexander, Middlebrook Farm, Covfefe. See, it's a name that doesn't. This is not even a word. I'm mispronouncing a word that doesn't even exist. Covfefe, lightning fast. Campaign will run in the marathon. 2 of the horses that she has bred. And Middlebrook Farm, the success you've had out there, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
How's that going on the farm these days?
Well, pretty good. I mean, we've had, actually, it's kind of interesting. I was looking the other day, there was 3 Middlebrook babies that went through the Fassig-Tipton May 2-year-old sale, and all 3 of those have won this year. So that's pretty good.
Good little resume to keep adding to, isn't it?
Not bad.
We know about the problems that the industry's had this year. We try not to belabor the point on here, but, one of the questions that keeps coming up is the breed just getting too closely inbred now? Is this a weaker horse that they're breeding overall? Speed only, endurance is secondary. Is that a legitimate concern right now, or is that just a lot of talk and what's been a lot of talk trying to figure out what all's going on?
I personally don't think that that's in fact the case. I know, like for myself, I have mares that I'm looking for speed, and I'm not really necessarily finding the stallions that I want to use that are going to put that speed back in there. So there are some horses that are getting a lot more mares than others. And I think the only thing I worry about is horses not getting a chance that deserve a legitimate chance.
Mm-hmm. And the industry overall, are you glad that they're keeping it at Santa Anita, the Breeders' Cup? I mean, I am, because I think, it's one of the marquee places. I'm glad that they're sticking with it. And
I think Santa Anita's done a lot of positive things to try and get things under control. And I'm very hopeful that we're going to have a great day of racing. Well, 2 great days of racing out there.
do you get nervous when the horse that you bred, that you already sold, but you bred and raised, and you're standing in the background? Well, you may be on the rail, I don't know, but you're kind of there watching one of your own. And
back in the day, I used to get like super nervous. My heart would just be like pounding. But now I'm relatively calm, because whatever's going to happen is going to happen.
Do you have predictions?
I have no predictions, but I have hopes.
which is the way I've led life,
Yeah.
That's the way I leave it. Is getting up in the morning and still going to work and, figuring out the breeding and everything, that still has to be a very exciting time at Middlebrook for you.
Trying not to make mistakes is really the key. I mean, we can talk all we want about trying to get the best of the best and all that, but sometimes it's just trying not to make mistakes.
You don't make mistakes.
Oh, yeah, plenty, just like everybody else.
Yeah, people ask me that are not followers of the sport necessarily, say, in baseball, if you hit 300, you're a good hitter. You could get in the Hall of Fame. You hit 300 as a bettor at the track, if you manage your money right, you're probably doing pretty good.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have a percent? What's a good percentage for a breeder? Obviously, 100 is what everybody wants. Nobody has 100% anything, I don't think, in any business.
I really don't look at things in terms of percentages. So I just hope that every horse is going to get the best chance that it can get. And, when your horses get in the right hands, when you sell them and have a real chance to do well, that's always a big thing for me.
And so far, the business is good. The horse business, is it a good business still to be in right now? Do you see a positive down the road with all the negative things that have happened this year?
Yeah, I think there's still lots and lots of people in the horse business that are very enthusiastic about it. And there's a lot of people that are willing to work very hard to make sure that things go in the right direction. So I am positive.
I will see you in California next week.
You will.
I will see. I'll look for the Covfefe hats of Middlebrook Farm. They'll be everywhere.
That'll be us.
Helen, congratulations on all the success. Althea and Bayern. I'm going to start leaving out names if I mention them all, but you've got Covfefe this year.
Go
I know.
Covfefe.
I've seen her. She's running and in the marathon campaign. So all the best to you in Middlebrook. And thank you so much for coming in. It means a lot.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Helen Alexander. We'll be back right after this. Stay with us on the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back. Some precious time left here on the Horse Racing Show, episode number 40. I'm so thankful that you're here. Thanks to our guests today, Laffit Pincay III and Helen Alexander, 2 great people. That's what we do each week here, is bring you the people that matter as people and in the horse business. I think we've done a pretty good job because I'm fortunate to know a lot of these folks. Mr. Thomas Kenny, you were talking a minute ago about Laffit talking about the track out there.
Yeah, it's they've definitely put a lot of work into it in light of the events that have happened this year.
And it'll be interesting that they're talking about, because it's always fast. California tracks are always fast. East Coast tracks were a little deeper, not as fast, usually. More of a play there. But Matoli had a big work. You heard Laffit talk about him. So a fast horse is going to be pretty fast on any track, I think.
Yeah. And it's, they're all running the same track at the same time, so it's an even playing field.
Well, that's it. I think sometimes people get a little too carried away. Some handicapper friends of mine get a little too carried away. Not much, but, hey, sometimes it just happens. And you can't always blame the track. Sometimes the horse just is not as fast.
Yep.
But it should be a great Breeders' Cup. We're going to talk more about that. Meanwhile, we're delighted. Can't tell you how happy we are to have our director, Scott Hall, back. just a minor thing called brain surgery that he had. And thank God you're good and you're back, Scott, and welcome back.
Back 100%. Thank you, Kenny. Good to be back.
I mean, you're amazing. You came out of brain surgery, literally, right? Because you had like a drip and, from a concussion, and you said rock and roll when you were first revived,
That's right. I was dying to get back to work. They held me for a few days, and I went crazy, but now I'm back. Everything's good.
All right, pal. Well, great to have you back. Thank you for being with us. To Ben Chaffins, had to be out this week. We'll see him next week. Thomas, Scott, thank you. Thank you all for tuning in. Tell your friends about it. Like us, love us, subscribe to us on Facebook.
We're dying for your affection.
we want you to like us. And YouTube as well. Follow us at Horse Racing Show. Tell me your favorite Breeders' Cup moments. Send those in to either Facebook or at Horse Racing Show on Twitter, and we'll talk about them next week. I'm Kenny Rice. We'll talk to you in episode 41. Thanks.